In the last lesson, we already learned about the overview of import and export management and also the comparative advantage. I gave you this example last week that is about US and Colombia. So, do you still remember what is comparative advantage? So when a country has a competitive advantage in producing a good if the opportunity cost of producing that good in terms of another goods is lower in that country than it is in another countries. So let me remind you about the example about US and Colombia again. So in test of producing 10 million rows in US, they can use that cost to produce 100,000 computers. However, in Colombia, the cost used to produce 10 million rows, they can produce 30,000 computers. So, since the opportunity cost of producing the rows in Colombia is less than compared to in terms of computers is lower than the opportunity cost of producing 10 million rows in the US. That's why Colombia has comparative advantage of producing rows, and US has the comparative advantage in producing computers, right? So in the trade between two countries can be benefit both countries if each country export the good in which it has a comparative advantage. So it means the trade between US and Colombia will benefit both US and Colombia if Colombia export rows to US and US export computer to Colombia. They will both countries will be benefit. However, in the real world, the international production and trade are determined in the marketplace where the supply and demand rule. So the proposed question is international trade really beneficial both countries? Like here, if Colombia only focus on producing rows and US only focus on producing computer, and Colombia will import computer from US and US import the rows from Colombia. If they do that, is it really beneficial for both US and Colombia? And the second question is, will US and Colombia actually just produce the products that they have comparative advantage? Like US only produce computer and Colombia only produce rows. In reality, will it really happen? And will the trade between them actually make both countries better off? So that is the proposed questions after this example. So to answer those questions is what we will learn today about Ricardian model. So in this lesson, we will develop a model of international trade, and this international trade model is originally proposed by a British economist named David Ricardo. And he was the first person who introduced the concept of comparative advantage in early 19th century. That's what it's called Ricardian Model. And in these lessons, the students are expected to understand and can explain how the Ricardian model works and how it illustrates the principle of comparative advantage. And the second learning expectation is the student has to understand how the technology and factor endowment determine the pattern of comparative advantage and welfare. And the third one is the misconception about comparative advantage. And this this lesson today, you can read more detail in the chapter 3 of the book I introduced you before, International Economics, Theory and Policy of Grumman. Okay? Okay, so now we will see what is Ricardian model about. So Ricardian model of trade emphasized the differences in technology across countries. And to keep this model as simple as possible, we just consider one factor of production, that is labor. Okay? All units of labor will earn the same reward, earn the same wage. The wage is the same for all units of labor. And please note that one can define unit of labor differently across workers that are skilled and unskilled. However, in this model, we will not capture that figure. Like we don't consider that different type of product have to require the use of different type labors. We just assume all the labors are the same and they all can produce different types of products. And in this model also cannot address any distribution or effect of trade. To simplify the model, we only consider one factor economy. It means that they only have one factor of production, that is labors. And the technology of home economy, got it, home's economy can be summarized by the label productivity in each country, and is expressed in terms of unit labor requirement. What is unit labor requirement? That is the number of hours of labor required to produce a pound of cheese and a gallon of wine. So in homes economy, we assume that they only produce two kind of products, that is cheese and wine. So we have ALW is the number of hours the labor required to produce a gallon of wine. And ALC is the number of hours the labor need to produce 1 pound of cheese. And we have 1 divided by ALW is the labor productivity in wine sector. It means the number unit of wine that they can produce by one worker. And 1 divided by ALC is the labor productivity in cheese sector. That is the number unit of cheese produced by one worker. So I give you one example. If we need in the home's economy, we need 1 hour to produce 1 pound of cheese, and 2 hours to produce a gallon of wine. So the labor productivity in Y section is 1 divided by 2. So it means in 1 hour, they can produce half of gallon of wine, and in 1 hour they can produce 1 pound of cheese. Okay, so this one is, and 1 divided by 2, that one is the labor productivity. And here, let's say that Q is the aggregate output of wine and cheese, QW and QC. It means the quantity that they should produce wine and cheese. And another one is the label limitation. So the LW is the number, like the labor they can offer to produce wine, and AL is the labor who produce cheese. We can calculate the aggregate employment in Y sector is equal to the unit labor requirement for Y times the number of quantity we should produce. Okay, so here earlier I said, for example, we need 2 hours to produce 1 gallon of wine, and we want to produce 500 gallon of wine. Then the aggregate employment in wine sector we need, that is will be LW will equal to 1000. Okay, and same as cheese. So for example, cheese, we need 1 hour to produce 1 pound of cheese, and we also want to produce 500 pounds of cheese. Then the total employment we need is 500. Okay, so the limit on production are defined by the inequality, that is L. L is the limit on production, like the limitation in the label. We can order any quantity of wine and cheese. However, we have to consider the constraint, the limitation in label. For example, here we need 1000 employment in wine sector and 500 in the cheese sectors. However, if the L, the limitation on production, is equal to 1000, so we will not have enough people, enough labor to produce 500 gallon of wine and 500 pounds of cheese, right? Okay, so based on this constraint, this limitation, this limits on production, we can build the production possibility frontier. So we can summarize the country's production possibility frontier. L is equal to the total employment in Y sector plus the aggregate employment in cheese factor. So based on this function, we can draw the graph like this. So go back with the example earlier. We have for the Y is 2 hours, right? For the cheese is 1 hour. And let's say that the limit on production of home's country is 1000. So if we just specialize, we just focus on producing wine and we don't produce cheese, the maximum quantity we can produce wine is 1000 divided 2. So we have 500. Okay. And if we only specialize in cheese and we don't produce wine, so the maximum quantity of cheese we can produce is 1000 divided by 1. We have 1000 pounds of cheese. That's why we can call this, we can draw this line. That is PPF, production possibility frontier. With the maximum products we can, maximum quantity of cheese we can produce is 1000, and for wine is 500 gallons. And we can see the slope here is equal to ALC divided by ALW, right? And this one is the opportunity cost of cheese in terms of wine. Okay, and this is equal to the absolute value of the slope of PPF. So in this case, we have the opportunity cost of cheese in terms of wine is 1 divided by 2. Okay, let's see this example. We have the economy total labor supply is 1000 hours. It takes 1 hour of labor to produce 1 pound of cheese and 2 hours of labor to produce a gallon of wine. So we can see the total labor used in production is 1 times pounds of cheese produced and plus 2 times gallons of wine produced. And this total must be no more than 1000 hours of labor available. So this one is present for this constraint, right? The total labor used cannot exceed the limit on production and the total labor. Okay, so the question is, if we need 500 pounds of cheese and 200 gallons of wine, how many labor supply do we need? It's so easy already. We can calculate by 1 times 500 plus 2 times 200. So we need 900 hours. Okay. The second question, can 400 pounds of cheese and 400 gallons of wine be produced at the same time? So let's see how many labor we need to produce 400 pounds of cheese. We need 1 times 400, and the number of hours we need to produce 400 gallons of white is 2 times 400. So the total labor we need is 1,200. And it already exists 1,000 hours. So the answer is no. We cannot produce 400 pounds of cheese and 400 gallons of wine. The third question, if the economy devoted all its labor to cheese production, how many pounds of cheese are produced? So it means they don't produce wine, they only focus on producing cheese. So how many pounds of cheese we can produce? So we use one, we have the total labor is 1,000. We have 1,000 hours and we need 1 hour to produce 1 pound of cheese. So the total pounds of cheese we can produce is 1,000 pounds. Okay? And if the economy devoted all its labor to wine production, how many gallons of wine are produced? So we have total is 1,000. We divide by 2. So we can produce 500. So when the economy devoted all its labor to produce cheese, it means they specialize in cheese. And if they devoted all its labor to wine production, it means that they specialize in wine. So when they will specialize in cheese and when they will specialize in wine, we will learn it later. Okay, so do you still remember about the opportunity cost we learned from last lesson, and I also mentioned earlier in these lessons? For example, let me go back with the example, this one. Okay, so the opportunity cost of producing 10 million rows in the US is 100,000 computers, right? And the opportunity cost in reverse, the opportunity cost of producing 100,000 computer is 10 million rows. So here we can see the opportunity cost of producing these products is the quantity of other products that we can use low cost to produce. But let's see in this case. To produce another pound of cheese would require ALC hours. Person hours is okay, hours. Each of these person hours could in turn have been used to produce gallons of wine. So instead of using ALC hours to produce cheese, we can use ALC hour to produce the wine. So we have the opportunity cost of cheese in terms of wine is ALC divided by ALW. So it's different from the last example about the rows and the computer is related to the quantity that they can produce, but here is related to labor productivity. So can you see the difference already? Okay, so let's see this example. We need 2 hours to produce 1 gallon of Y, that is ALW, and here is ALC. So we can see the opportunity cost of each pound of cheese is 1 divided by 2 gallon of Y, and this one is the slope, the absolute value slope of the production possibility frontier, like here, this one. Okay. Okay, so in a competitive economy, supply decisions are determined by attempt of individuals to maximize their earnings. So their objective is maximize their earning. In this model, we just simplify economy. So since we only consider labor as a factor of production, so the supply of cheese and Y will be determined by the movement of labor to whichever sector pay higher wage. So if cheese sector pay the higher wage to the laborers, they will they will tend to produce Y more than cheese. Okay. So for example, the price of 1 gallon of Y is $7, and the price of 1 pound of cheese is $4. So what will worker will produce? What will workers produce? And we can see here, we need 2 hours to produce 1 gallon of Y, and the price is $7. So it means people can earn $3.5 per hour. That is equal to 7 divided by 2, right? And for cheese, people can earn $4 per hour. So if you are a worker, what will you produce? Of course, you will produce the product that can help you earn more money, right? Because their objective is maximize the earnings, right? So in this case, they will specialize in cheese production. So we can see that if the ratio between PW divided by ALW less than PC ALC, we will specialize in cheese, right? How if the price of cheese is not $4 anymore, but is $3? So we earn here only $3 per hour. So they will specialize in Y production. So if the ratio between the price of Y divided by the hour they need to spend to produce 1 gallon of Y is less than the ratio of cheese of price of 1 pound of cheese divided by the number of hours used to produce 1 pound of cheese, we will specialize in cheese. If this ratio is larger than this ratio, we will specialize in Y. How if it's equal? If it's equal, we will not, the economy will not specialize completely in one production. They will produce both cheese, white and cheese. They will produce both products. And if when they produce both products, we call it incomplete specialization. And the production of white and cheese are located on the PPF, the production possibility frontier, to maximize the value of the revenue. So here, the quantity will locate here or here in the PPF line so that they can maximum the revenue. In the case that PW divided by ALW equal to PC divided by LC. So if it's equal, the quantity they produce of each product will locate in the line PF here. So the conclusion we can make that is the economy will specialize in production of wine if the relative price of wine exceeds its opportunity cost in terms of cheese. Relative price of wine, that is PC divided by PY divided by PC. That is the relative price of wine. Exceeds its opportunity cost in terms of cheese, that is ALW divided by ALC. So when the relative price of wine exceeds the opportunity cost in terms of cheese, they will specialize in wine production. And conversely, if the relative price of wine is less than its opportunity cost in terms of cheese, they will specialize their cheese production. And if there is no international trade, the relative price of goods are equal to the relative unit labor requirements. So here, why we have this, you can look at here. From here, we can see the ratio between the price and the total labor we spend for 1 pound of cheese and 1 gallon of wine, right? So we have this, how this one and this one is equivalent. So we have PW divided by ALW with times with 1 divided by ABC times ALW. This one we already learned it maybe in secondary school. Okay, so I multiply an amount of quantity that is ALW divided by PC. Then it will also from here to here, okay, larger than PC ALC and also times ALW PC. So here, this one and this one we eliminate, so we have what left is PW divided by PC larger than PC and PC. ALW divided by ALC. So the same, we can prove how two these terms are equivalent. And here, so here we can see this one is the relative price of Y, and here is the opportunity cost. That's why here opportunity cost of Y in terms of cheese. Okay. That is the relationship between the price, the relative price, and the supply. So that is when we consider one factor economy countries, and that countries only produce two different products that are wine and cheese. How about if we consider two countries? What is the difference? So let's consider two countries, home and foreign. We assume that the relative unit labor requirement of cheese in home country is smaller than the relative unit labor requirement for cheese in the foreign countries. So this one implies that the foreign is relatively more productive in wine than home. Then the foreign has the comparative advantage in wine, and home has a comparative comparative advantage in cheese. And we note that the country size L and L star and the absolute productivity do not affect the pattern of comparative advantage. But if we don't consider the international trade, the relative price of cheese and wine in each country will be determined by the relative unit labor requirement. So if we don't consider the international trade, the PC divided by the PW, that is the relative price of cheese, will equal to the ALC divided by ALW. Without international trade, the relative price of cheese will be equal to the relative unit labor requirements. And in foreign, also the relative price in cheese will equal to the relative unit labor requirement, LW. Okay. However, when we consider the international trade, the price will not be that determined by the domestic considerations anymore. If the relative price of cheese is higher in foreign than in home, it will be profitable to ship cheese from home to foreign and ship wine from foreign to home, because home has the comparative advantage in wine. So home has the comparative advantage in cheese, so that they should export the cheese and import wine from foreign. So eventually home will export enough cheese and foreign will export enough wine to equalize the relative price. But how we can determine and what determine the level of what price should we sell? So let's see how we can determine the price trade. Okay, let's look at this figure. Let me introduce first. The RD curve is the blue curve is the relative demand curve of Y. This one is Y. And the red curve is the relative demand of cheese. Okay. And RS, this line, is the relative supply curve of cheese. Okay. So we have the x-axis is the relative quantity of cheese, and the y-axis is the relative price of cheese. Okay. So as we can see in this figure, if the relative price of cheese is less than ALC divided by ALW, this one is the relative unit labor requirement of cheese. There is no supply of cheese, right? So why? So we will look if the relative price of cheese is less than the relative unit labor requirement of cheese. I will give you an example, the old example that piece, so you can understand more why there is no supply of cheese here. So earlier in the last example, the price we sell 1 pound of cheese is $4, and we sell 1 gallon of guai is $7. Okay. And the hour they require to produce 1 pound of cheese is 1 hour, and the time that they require to produce 1 gallon of wine is 2 hours. Okay, I reduced this price to $3. So if what the labor earn when they produce cheese in 1 hour, so 1 hour they will earn $3, right? And for producing wine, 1 hour they will earn $7.5. So that's why we learned earlier, if PC if PC if PC divided by the ALC is less than PY, Y is W, and ALW, they will specialize in Y production. So it's the same as this one. So if the relative price of cheese is less than the relative unit labor requirement of cheese, the home country, this one is home country will specialize in wine production. But here we have the assumption that the relative unit labor requirement of cheese is in home country is less than in foreign. So here we have PC divided by PW also less than A star LC divided by A star LW. That's why the foreign country also specialize in wine production. So if the relative price of cheese is less than the relative unit labor requirement of cheese, both countries will specialize in wine production. Okay? And here, so in this area, both home and foreign countries specialize in wine. In the second case, that when the relative price of cheese is larger than the relative unit labor requirement of cheese in the foreign countries, or the foreign country will specialize in cheese. And since we assume that the unit labor requirement of cheese is larger than the in the foreign country is larger than home, so we have the relative price of cheese is also larger than the relative unit labor requirement of cheese in the home countries. So the home countries will specialize in cheese as well. So in this part, both countries will specialize in wine production. But if the relative price of cheese is located from here in upper part, they both countries will specialize in cheese. How about when the relative price of cheese is in this area in the between? So consider in home country, the relative price of cheese is larger than the relative unit labor requirement of cheese. That's why the home country will specialize in cheese. However, the relative price of cheese is less than the relative unit labor requirement in foreign. So in foreign, they will specialize wine production. So when the relative price of cheese located in this area, the countries will specialize according to their comparative advantage. Okay. And in this case, if the relative price of cheese is less than the unit labor requirement this area, and when it's larger than the relative unit requirement in foreign country, we cannot find the equilibrium price for the world. The typical case is complete specialization according to the comparative advantage with equilibrium PT. So it's here in this point. It's the intersection between the demand and the supply. So we have PT here. In the case of incomplete specialization, it's also possible if, for example, in this blue line, we can see the intersection between the demand and the supply. And it's when we have the relative price of cheese is equal to the relative unit labor requirement, ALC divided by ALW. Or here, when the demand of cheese become the green line, we can see the intersection here, this point, the point 3. Intersection between supply and demand. We also have the relative price of cheese will equal to the relative unit labor requirement in foreign country. This is most likely happen when one country is very large in terms of the size of productivity relative to the other. So if the foreign country is very large, like powerful, much more powerful than home countries, or home country has more powerful than the foreign country. If not, then the complete specialization will happen, and the bigger country will be incompletely specialized. Okay. Okay, then how we can construct the world PPF, the production possibility frontier. We can build for each country, then after that we build for the world. Okay, so we consider this example. We consider two countries, that is home and foreign, and the limit on production or the limit label in home country is 1200, and they need 6 hours to produce 1 pound of cheese, and they also need 6 hours to produce 1 gallon of wine. However, in foreign countries, the limit on production is 400, and they need 4 hours to produce 1 pound of cheese and 1 hour to produce 1 gallon of wine. So we can construct this PPF line for the home country, right? If they don't produce wine, if they don't, this one is Y, W, okay. If they don't produce wine, they can utilize all the label for producing cheese. So the maximum pounds of cheese they can produce is 200. And the same here, if they don't produce cheese, they only focus all the label on produce wine, the maximum gallons of wine they can produce is 200 gallons. And here we can construct the home PPF with the slope is 1. This one is there. What is this? Do you still remember? The slope is 1. It means the opportunity cost of cheese in terms of wine is equal to 1. Okay. The same we can construct the the foreign PPF here with the slope is 4. So here we have the PPF home country and foreign country. Then how we can combine them then to build the world PPF. Let's see here what products that the home country want to specialize and foreign country want to specialize. Change this one to W for me. This one is the wine production, and this one is the cheese production. Okay. So we will check the ratio ALC divided by ALW is equal to 6 divided by 6 is equal to 1, right? How about for foreign countries, that is equal to ALC star divided by ALW stars is equal to 4. So we can see the relative unit labor requirement on cheese in home country is less than foreign countries. So foreign country will specialize in Y, and the home country will specialize in cheese. Okay, so if foreign countries specialize in Y, they don't produce cheese, how many Y they can produce? That is 400 divided by 1. So they can produce 400 gallon of Y. And when home country specialize in cheese, they don't produce Y. So the maximum pounds of cheese they can produce is 1200 divided by 6 is equal to 200. Okay, so the maximum cheese when the home country specialize, that is 200, and when the foreign country specialize in guai production, the maximum gallon of guai they produce is 400. This one is home countries, and this one is foreign countries. However, cheese also can produce by foreign country, right? So if foreign country produce cheese, they can produce 400 divided by 4, so it's 100. So that's why we have one more 100 here from foreign country, and we have the total is 300. And if the home country produce Y, they can produce also 200 gallon of Y. So that's why here we have the total Y production is 600, and this is 200, and we can calculate here the slope is 1 as well, and the slope here is 4. That is how we construct the graph PPF, and also this is the way after constructing the graph PPF we can examine how trade affects each country possibility for consumption. It's become a new PPF life. So when trade is allowed, each economy can consume a different mix of cheese and wine from the mix it produces. And in each case, the trade can enlarge the range of choice. If we have the international trade, we have more choices, and it will make the residents of each country better off. So another political discussion of international trade often focus on comparison of wage rate in different countries, and we want to know what does the different wage affect the productivity. Okay, so if cheese is produced, the workers in cheese sector are paid uh, an amount wage C, small WC is equal to the price of cheese divided by the unit labor requirement. Please help me distinguish small w. This one is represent for wage, and small capital W is stand for Y. Okay. For example, we sell the cheese with $4, the price $4, and the number of hours they require to produce 1 pound of cheese is 1 hour. So we have the wage of the workers who work in the cheese section, cheese sector. They will earn $4 per hour. And if Y is produced, the worker in Y sector are paid WW. This one is wage of workers working in the Y section. Is the price of Y divided by the time they require to produce 1 gallon of Y. So for example, we have the selling price is $7, like same as last example, and we need 2 hours to finish. So the wage of the workers who work in the Y sector, they will earn $3.5 per hour. Okay, and since, do you still remember that they try to maximize their earning, right? So they will tend to focus on the products that give them more earning. So whenever both cheese and Y are produced, the wage in the long run of workers in C sector and workers in W sector has to be equal to each other. Okay, because if this one is higher, the labor from Y sector will just jump to G sector. Okay, and if we have the ratio between price of G divided to price of Y, this one is the relative price of cheese is equal to the relative unit labor requirement of cheese when both cheese and white are produced. Okay, and if the country specialize in the cheese or white in a good I is have two options, cheese or white, then the wage will be equal to the price divided by the unit labor requirement of each sector. How if we consider two countries, that home and foreign country? So the relative wage of a country's workers is the amount of uh, the amount that they are paid per hour compare with the amount workers in another country are paid per hour. So it's let's say the wage in home country is W and the wage in foreign home is W star. So the ratio between W and W star is relative wage. Let me change another color. Relative wage. Okay, we assume that two countries are open to trade at the relative price that is PT, and home will specialize in cheese and foreign countries specialize in Y. Then at that point we will have the relative price is larger than the relative unit labor requirement of cheese in the home country and less than the relative unit labor requirement in foreign country. Okay, and then the wage in home country will equal to the relative price of cheese divided by the unit labor requirement of cheese in the home country. This one in home country. And the wage in the foreign countries will equal to the relative price of Y divided by the unit labor requirement of Y in the foreign country. So this one is applied for the case that home specialize in cheese and foreign specialize in Y. The relative wage here, here, this ratio is the relative wage. So this one determined by the terms of trade and the absolute productivity advantage between two countries. Okay, so there are two factors to determine the relative wage. The first one is the term of trade and the second one is the absolute productivity advantage between two countries. So in an economy with just one factor economy, here we only consider the labor as productivity factor, and where this factor face the same price that PTC and PTW, the relative wage, the ratio between W and W star, the relative wage is also a measure of the relative welfare. Note that the absolute productivity determine the differences in welfare between different countries, while the relative productivity determine the pattern of trade, the comparative advantage. Okay, so remember the absolute productivity determine the differences in welfare, and the relative productivity determine the pattern of comparative advantage. Okay, however the gains from the trade are independent of differences in absolute productivity. Okay, so the gain, where is the mouse? the gain from the trade. When two countries join the international trade, the gains from international trade are independent. Remember, it's independent in absolute productivity. Okay, and in an equilibrium with trade, the increase in absolute productivity increase will generate welfare gains to both countries. Okay, so if their absolute productivity increase, the welfare gains to both countries also increase. The direct welfare gains to the country with increased productivity, and indirect welfare gains via the term of trade to the trade partner. Okay, now I will give you an example so you can understand more what we just talked about, because when you do it you will understand more. So we have also two countries. The first one is home. Sorry, this one is only have one country, that is the home country, and they have the labor availability is 1200, and it can produce two goods, that is apples and bananas. The unit labor requirement in apple production is 3, and the banana production is 2. So now we have to draw their home's production possibility frontier. We have to construct the PPF for home country. And the second one, what is the opportunity cost of apples in terms of banana? And the third question is, in the absence of trade, it means there is no international trade, what would be the price of the apple in terms of bananas, and why? So how to construct the PPF life for one country, I already teach you in the last example. So here I will just show you the answer. We have the total is 120, right? 1200. Then we need 3 hours to produce apple and 2 hours to produce banana. So if the home country specialize in apple, the maximum apple they can produce is 1200 divided by 3, so we have 400. And same if the home country specialized banana, the maximum banana they can produce is 600. So that's why we have the PPF life like this, and the slope is equal to the opportunity cost of apple in terms of banana, that is 3, let's say AL apple divided by AL banana, that is 3 divided by 2. And I just answer for you the question B, that is the opportunity cost of apples in terms of banana is 3/2. And if there is no international trade, the relative price of apple in terms of banana will be equal to the relative unit labor requirement of apples in terms of banana, that is also equal to 3 divided by 2. Okay, it's easy. Let's go to the another example that have two countries, home and foreign. So the home production is described in example 1 here. Okay, and we have another country that is foreign, and the labor force of foreign is 800, And the unit labor requirement of apple production is 5, and in banana production is 1. So now you have to graph the foreign production possibility frontier. This one is easy. And construct the world relative supply curve. Now this one we also learned before in example. So please do this one by yourself. Here I just summarize for you. In home, the total label is 1,200, and the unit label requirement cost for apple is 3, and the unit label requirement for banana is 2. And for rain country, the label limit is 800, and the unit label requirement for apple is 5, and unit label requirement for banana is 1. So construct the world ppf by yourself and the foreign ppf by yourself. Okay, if you don't remember, please go back the previous slide and see how to do it. So maybe you will ask why we have to study this, why we have to study the Ricardian model. Be- Although it's very simple, like it's too simple so that it's not really realistic. You cannot apply it for complicated case. So why we have to study this? Although it's not really a complete analysis of either the cause of effect, the cause or the effect of international trade, or focus on relative labor productivities. However, this model help us, give us an this model is an useful tool to think about the trade issues. And this model is a good way to deal with several common misconceptions about the meaning of comparative advantage and the nature of gains from free trade. So, what are the misconceptions about the comparative advantage? The free trade is only beneficial if your country is strong enough to stand up to foreign competition. It's not uh, if you have if you have the comparative advantage in producing wine, you just specialize in wine production, then export it, and you don't need to care about other factor, and you will get more benefit. It's not true. You have to consider if your country is strong enough to against to compare to the foreign competition. And the gains from the trade depends on the comparative rather than the absolute advantage. And the competitive advantage of an industry not only depends on its productivity relative to foreign industry, but it also depends on the domestic wage rate relative to the foreign wage rate. So there are two factors that are we have to consider, that is domestic wage rate and also uh, productivity compared to the foreign countries. And the foreign competition is unfair and hurts other countries when it is based on low wage. Okay, it's not like you pay lower salary to the worker, you will get more. It's unfair and hurts other countries. You shouldn't do it. And the trade exploits a country and make it worse off if its workers receive much lower wage than the worker in other nations. So we have to consider about the wage. Okay, so that's all for today's lesson. So after we go back to the expectation again, after these lessons, please help me remember what is Ricardian model of trade, uh, how we can construct what is Ricardian model of trade, what kind of factors we have to consider, and how to construct how to construct the PPF, the production possibility frontier, and determine when we should specialize which products, and how to determine the relative price. Okay, thank you.